Hey everyone, Bob Thibodeau here in the Ask Bob podcast where I answer questions that you have about podcasting. Today, I want to talk a little bit about put it like this. I was asked this question, when should I not start a podcast? Now, this is a very unique question, and I thought it was deserving of a somewhat detailed answer. As it seems like everybody is giving information on who needs to have a podcast, why you should have a podcast, how to start a podcast, but nobody is talking about reasons not to start a podcast. Some of the misguided assumptions about people wanting to start a podcast includes fame and fortune. So in this series of episodes, I want to cover some very good reasons you should not start a podcast. Now, if you think you find yourself, wandering down a few trails that I'm going to identify here, if you identify yourself on there, you need to rethink your motivation for wanting to start a podcast. Okay, so let's get started. As I covered in previous episodes, podcasting is the new communication medium for this generation. It is easy to enter, it's fairly easy to produce, it's easy to promote. All of this makes it fairly easy for someone to just hit record and they are now a podcaster. But the same accessibility also means there are many, many podcasters out there, and many of them, truthfully, are not that great. So the competition is to stand out amongst the crowd. How do you do that? By being unique in what you're offering. Be unique in the way you present the information. Be unique in the information you're presenting. I mean, if you look at statistics, only about the top 20% of podcasts make any money at all. By that, I mean, they don't even cover their expenses. Okay, let's say your expenses are $50 a month and you make $2.50 per month from some kind of advertising click-through revenue. You are in the top 20% of all podcasters income-wise. Okay, not too impressive, is it? Only about 5% of podcasters make enough money each month to cover their expenses. And I'm not talking about salaries or staff. I'm talking about hosting, advertising, and equipment costs. If you're not over 10,000 downloads per episode, most sponsors will not even want to talk to you. The usual rates are something like $30 for every 1,000 downloads that you have. So if you have 1,000 downloads per episode and you produce 5 episodes a week, you're looking at $150 per week before taxes and expenses. So only about 1% of the podcasters right now make a living from podcasting, probably even less than that. These podcasters have a loyal fan base that they've built up over time. They've built their following over time, often years. They have something else that they are offering, and the podcast is just one avenue of the business plan for them. And most of them have close to 1 million downloads per episode, definitely over 100,000 per episode. So if you're planning on starting a podcast in order to make a full-time income, leave your 9-to-5 job, and have the easy life, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Now, I don't want you to think it's impossible, because it's not impossible. There are people out there doing it, but it's not going to happen very quickly. And in most cases, it will not even happen at all. Okay, hate to burst your bubble on that, but that's just the facts. Even though the equipment is not necessarily expensive to buy, and the podcast creation and the hosting is not that expensive, it's not free either. Yes, you can get by with a cheap microphone or even use your cell phone, but the quality will drive away some listeners. And if you're driving away listeners, you're not getting subscribers who keep coming back, and you will never make any more money. And let's not forget about the time that it costs you to make and produce your podcast. Time is money. For example, let's say you have a weekly 1-hour podcast. It will take you at least 3 hours to prepare for it, 1 hour to produce it, then probably another 2 hours to edit and get the show notes ready and then load it for publication. That is 6 hours of time for one podcast. Now, that's not a big deal, right? Well, if your goal is to add to the family budget, you could have gone out and gotten a part-time job for those 6 hours per week, let's say at $10 an hour, and brought in over $200 to the family budget in 1 month. So if making money is one of the driving factors that is making you want to make and produce your own podcast, rethink your priorities. You are probably not going to add income to the family budget, at least not for a long time. You'll be spending time and money instead of saving time and money. Now, next time I'll discuss the skill and knowledge requirements as reasons when you should not be starting a podcast. Now, if you have a podcasting question, send it along to me. You can leave your questions in the comments section down below, but as I always say, a better way of communicating with me and making sure I'm able to see your questions quickly is by using the contact form on my website. Go to podcast-training.com/contact or click on the contact tab up in the menu. Fill out the form and send me your questions. If your question is used on the Ask Bob podcast, I'll give you credit for bringing it to my attention, and I will send you a free download of my book, The Complete Guide to Podcasting. That's a $37 value if you went over to Amazon to buy it. And you'll get it free just for asking Bob a question. And if it's used on the Ask Bob program. If you include your website, your podcast information, or a product, I'll reference that as well and put that information in the show notes. Who knows, you may see some increased traffic to your website, your podcast, or get some additional sales just by asking Bob a question. If I get the same question asked, the first person to ask it is the one that gets the credit. So if you have a question, don't wait. Ask today. Go to podcast-training.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you can be notified every time we release a new episode and answer some questions. Till we talk again, keep talking. Remember, you're awesome.